Well, thank you for coming to the talk. My name is Heather, and I am the project officer for the Waterscapes Project. The Waterscapes Project is all about using nature to combat flooding and to mitigate the consequences of flooding, because we can't always control it, predict it, so can we mitigate the consequences as much as possible? And this project is all about using nature, so natural flood management features, which I'll discuss with you. So flooding, fish and the future. Any questions you have, you're welcome to ask me as we go. Okay, so this week alone, we've had 140 flood alerts issued by the Met Office. Come on in. Hello, hello. This is Ali, who's also on our project. She's the coordinator. So please ask us any questions as we go. Usually we hear the term once in every 100 years as a flood measure. Now we're hearing one in every 50 years, and very recently it's now one in every 9 years. So they're becoming more and more frequent. We've had the wettest 6 months since records began in 1890. So between June and December last year, the wettest ever on record. And the 2007 floods, I'm sure people will remember, 55,000 homes were flooded. So this isn't something we can continue to ignore. It's something that needs majorly addressing, and I'll run through why it's so important that we address it for people and for wildlife. So just something to bear in mind as we go through is how well prepared are we, how well prepared are you, and what can we be doing about it. So we have 4 types of flooding. We have a river flood, we have a coastal flood, we have the rain flooding, which is the surface water flooding that you tend to see in the urban areas, and the overwhelm of the drainage systems when it's all coming back up through the systems. And then we have groundwater flooding. And a compound flood is when you get a mixture of them. And that's often what we have when the river floods, and then you've got that accumulated with the urban flooding as well. So we have a phenomenon in the UK called the North Atlantic Oscillation, and that's where you have all of the highs and the lows of pressure over the Atlantic, which causes really, really strong westerly winds to come in. And as the climate warms, they're getting stronger. So you've got this, these huge pressure systems, huge rain, huge amounts of water. And the reason we're having so much more water is that for every 1 degree that the atmosphere warms, it's able to hold 7% more moisture. So there's just so much more moisture in the atmosphere, stronger winds. And then, of course, you get the polar opposite, we're also seeing the extremes. So when you suddenly have lots of dry followed by lots of rain, you see trees come down because the root systems aren't able to anchor. And we're not able to predict when it's going to be really dry or when it's going to be really wet. So with rivers, some element of help is that we can say, right, okay, we'll let you know when the river's about to flood, you can leave your homes. But with urban flooding, there is very little prediction that we can do. We don't know where these storms are really going to hit to a specific degree. So this is an ideal landscape for a big storm to arrive. In this kind of landscape, you have 40% of the rain evapotranspirating. So it's being held maybe temporarily on the leaves, on the ground, and it's evaporating. you get 10% runoff. So a very low percentage runoff. You have 25% infiltrated into the shallow regions of the earth, and then 25% deeply going down. So you've lost 50% of that water just by sinking into the greenery. In contrast, sorry, it's a bit of a rubbish picture, that one, isn't it? It looks better on my computer. We have 55% runoff. So you've got your impermeable surfaces, you've got your impermeable roofs, everything is funneled to the drains. You only have 10% shallow infiltration and only 5% deep infiltration. So it's just going straight off into the storm drains or straight off into the sewers. Often this water goes into the sewers and then it's chemically treated, which, as you can imagine, is not good. Contrast this with often urban areas are on floodplains. And then on top of that, the surrounding fields, they've probably been drained for farming as well. So not a good scenario. Couple this with the fact that we have huge amounts of pollution in our air. So we've got nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, and we've got no trees to absorb that pollution either. So this water has atmospheric pollutants in. And it also has all the nasties that you can imagine. It's got the microplastics, it's got oils from the car, it's got aggregates, it's got all sorts of horrible things, which culminates in the UK having the worst rivers, England having the worst rivers in the UK. So in England, just 14% of our rivers are rated as good. Much better in Scotland, 66%, we should all move to Scotland, and Wales, 40% are rated as good. So this chemical cocktail of sewage, agricultural runoff and road pollution is, as you can imagine, having huge consequences for our wildlife and us as well. The water companies are particularly bad in the south and southwest of England for some reason. So this is what happens. Again, apologies for the crappy photo, better on my computer. This is Hebden Bridge, which I have some friends in, and it floods every year. In Hebden Bridge's case, the surrounding forest was felled for grouse hunting, and year on year it floods and many of the small businesses will go bust. People cannot afford their insurance premiums, so this is a huge problem. In Australia, for example, people are being charged $24,000 for their insurance. Scotland, in the poorest parts, 10% of the people cannot afford their insurance, and so either just have to deal with the consequences and the financial problems that brings, but it's a huge problem. So it will get cheerier as this goes on. This is all a bit doom and gloom for now. Crop failures, even more doom and gloom. It creates a real problem of food insecurity and obviously economic damage to the farmers. Damage to the soil, it becomes compacted, it becomes unusable, it's polluted, and the chemicals from farming, so your nitrates and your pesticides and herbicides, is responsible for 40% of the pollution in the English rivers. So let's go organic and biodynamic when we shop. Untreated sewage goes into our water systems, which is responsible for 35% of the pollution. Obviously, wild swimming is very popular. It's really good for our well-being. Having natural spaces to be like this, even to paddle in as a child, parents are stopping their children from entering watercourses because of this. And the polluted water systems tend to be in the poorer areas because that's where the sewage systems or the industry tends to be. The water, as you can imagine, is horrid. There are things called forever chemicals, which are not broken down, can't be removed by the water purification systems, and we have very high levels in our water. So I'm going to buy a water filter. I'm sure many of you already have them. So that is something to think about. Springs as well. Obviously, it's very important for many people to access fresh water from springs, the animals as well, and they too will be compromised. Can anyone tell me what this lovely creature is? Salmon. Yeah. So salmon spawn on the bottom of the river. They tend to like quite small stones to lay their eggs in. If there's lots of sediment in the bottom of the river, they then get covered up and they don't get enough oxygen to the eggs. And if you're having a huge influx if you're having a huge influx of water, then those eggs are just washed away. So in England and Wales, 38% of the fish fail their health checks due to disease caused directly by pollution. And the Wildlife Trust said that rising pollution levels are placing 10% of our aquatic wildlife at the risk of extinction. Financially, our UK fisheries provide £1.7 billion to the economy. So you've got your salmon, your eels, your freshwater clams and whatnot. So the consequences are huge. Anyone can tell who this one is?
Saw it yesterday at Slimbridge.
Did you? Oh, amazing. Yeah, our friendly kingfisher friend. Obviously, everything's going to go up the food chain. So if you've got really high densities of these forever chemicals in the fish, they're not going to be able to filter this. They're not going to be able to function well, and it travels up the food chain. Research has shown that bearded tits, their wintering grounds being flooded, they don't come back the next year. We have our wonderful water vole. They're not able to access their burrows. There's damage to their burrows, and actually drought is most damaging to water vole because they're more vulnerable to predation because the vegetation has been reduced. The water vole is the UK's fastest declining mammal. They are now protected, but traditionally when you would have a river suddenly being straightened, it would damage them, their habitats, and they are in decline. Otters, just as an interesting fact, are actually helping them, the return of otters, because the otters eat their predator, the American mink. So, yay for otters. Adders as well have been found to be in decline as a direct result of flooding, as you can imagine. So the consequences are far-reaching. So I'm going to get a bit more positive now. Thank you for bearing with all the doom and gloom. So what are our solutions? Does anyone know what this is? Not you, Ali? This is called a swale. And it's great that none of you know what it is, because this is the future of natural flood management. This is the sort of thing, so Naunton Park flooded in Cheltenham in 2007. People's gardens were submerged for days. So our project has been identifying areas that flood and what can we do about it, and not just how can we reduce the flooding, but how can we improve it for wildlife as well. So here we have a swale. So it's dug deeply into the ground. So when it rains, it fills up. It then serves as an aquatic habitat for our aquatic life. And then if it gets too high, it has this drainage system which then connects it back to the traditional drainage. So this was all planted with wild flowers all around by the local children of Naunton Park. That's a really important element of our work, that we are engaging children in practical conservation work, so meaningful work, and engaging them in their community problems and teaching them real life community action, so they can grow up and hopefully be the change makers that we need in this world. So we also did lots of tree planting here, and the path was added as well, which has actually encouraged lots more people to use the park with prams. Joggers have hugely increased, and then of course that keeps people on one particular bit, so we're not hugely impacting and compacting the earth everywhere else. So that's one of our projects at Naunton Park. And Plot Court, I don't know if anyone's ever gone to visit Plot Court, North Gloucester near Oxstalls. You may not have gone because it's so soggy and you would have come back with wet feet. So it was turned into a wetland area because there was nothing else that could be done. And we are now extending that wetland area. So it will have 3 more scrapes. A scrape is, as it sounds, scraping the land away. There'll be no drainage, so it's more of a natural ecosystem. So if anyone wants to visit there, that is really lovely actually. It's got a lot of wildlife and nice little scrapes. Has anyone heard of a rain garden? Oh, this is an educational talk for all of you then. This is brilliant. So a rain garden, again, it's a natural management feature. It's a SUD, a sustainable urban drainage system. It's not a sexy name, but it is what it is. So rain gardens, you disconnect the downpipe, which would normally go straight into the sewage system, ideally not, but it typically goes straight down into the storm drains. So instead, you divert it off into a rain garden. It goes through the plants, through membrane and sand to filter out as much of the pollutants as you can. A layer of pebbles. In our instance, we used leca, which is a clay ball which absorbs lots of moisture. And then any extra goes back out into the outfall pipe into the drain. So it brings greenery to urban areas where it's most needed. It holds back the moisture, and it is an educational tool because it shows what can be done in terms of water conservation. So as part of this project, this is in Tuffley Court Community Centre. This one is holding 2,000 litres of water back. And Tuffley has very little greenery. So the idea is once Tuffley Centre has one, then maybe Tuffley Library can have one, and then we can start doing lots in the area. If you go as if you were going to Stroud, and then you take a right down Tuffley Lane, and then left on Robert Raikes Avenue, that takes you to, yes. Yeah, next to the parade of shops with the bakery and the co-op.
Okay, I'm at the other end.
Park
School.
Yes, we're about to do some work there. hopefully lots of de-paving and maybe rain gardens if we can get permission from the landlord.
I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, we'll have a chat afterwards. And I could find you Rosie, who is running the project. So she'd be the person to...
We'd be near enough to come round and have a look within 5 minutes.
Amazing. And maybe help look after some of the plants, maybe? Because that is... that's... I don't know if any of you have worked in community growing or community work. It's often the question that the councillors ask you is, well, who's going to look after it? Who's going to look after the plants? The maintenance. So we rely on the community and volunteers to help look after these. This is our rain garden that we just finished. The plumbing went in yesterday, I believe, at the Gloucester Royal Hospital. So a huge amount of people who would never expect to see a rain garden or be interested in SUDS and natural flood management. So a really wide variety of people are now able to engage in this kind of work. So as you can see from the photo on the right, sorry, on this, you can't quite see it because it's been cut off, but it's disconnected. It was going straight down into a drain, disconnected, and it will feed the plants. And we had some amazing volunteers. So if anyone wants to volunteer with us who doesn't already, we had 2-3 amazing volunteers help us with this woodwork. So they were very clever and very patient and produced this wonderful seated rain garden. So it's functional, and obviously in a hospital landscape where people really need cheering up and really need to experience the power of nature therapy, then this serves that purpose as well as being a practical tool in the fight against flooding.
Can you tell me how does it deal with the drought end and also with the heavy rain we've had? I can imagine that being totally flooded for a few days and then we have a drought, or a dry spell for a month, and the whole thing could just dry out, couldn't it?
So it will never become flooded because it has, can you see, or you can see more clearly on this one, the outfall pipe. So it will only hold as much water, and it also has the overflow pipe. So if there's a really high amount of water, it will quickly go into the overflow pipe and straight out again. Drought, the only thing we can do is have drought tolerant plants that hopefully have established by the time the drought time comes.
They're tall, so there's more depth there than you're showing us on that.
Yeah, this one, the one in Tuffley is nearly a metre tall, so that can hold 2,000 litres.
So it's really kind of above ground soakaway, really.
In this instance, yes. I'll show you some pictures soon where we're going to be working at Warden Hill in Cheltenham, and we're going to do a sunken rain garden, so digging straight into the ground, and that's more of your traditional soakaway, and that will be again in an urban area.
That might be what I need.
In your garden?
Yeah.
I mean, in my dad's, been talking obviously to my dad about rain gardens and SUDS and whatnot, and he was like, what, that thing I've done there? And I just turned around and his downpipe had loads of holes in that watered the garden as it went to the drain. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's simple, that kind of thing. He was like, I've been doing that for 50 years. So yeah, lots of these, there can be very small changes to your downpipes or to your systems to re-divert the water and hold it back. Because once it gets to the rivers, we're not able to do a huge amount about it. We can't build any higher banks there's no room for wetlands in urban areas. So we've got to slow the flow, at least, as you say, the huge amounts of water when it comes. That's when it becomes really, that's when the holding capacity is exceeded. So if we can hold it back as much as possible and slow the flow, take the peak off of the graph, if you will, then these are all just small things to add up, hopefully, to a big solution. This is here at Robbinswood. Robbinswood, as you may know, if you're a frequent visitor, gets very soggy. This is just on the right-hand side. If you are walking up the hill, you sort of take a right, take a left at the playground and then take a right, and it swerves around, and you'll see this. So this is a very crude example of something called a leaky dam. So when that big gush of rain comes and everything quickly rises, then you've got this physical barrier to hold it back, ideally behind a dug-in scrape like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to get secondary school children to come and do, again, some practical conservation work with us, get them in there in the summer so they don't drown in the mud, and make that deeper, and then they can do some physical leaky dams. And I think what will be nice is if you get the smaller twigs, so that for their little hands, that will be much better for them. So we'll do a series of leaky dams at Robbinswood, and also at the very top, it's called the military field at Robbinswood. That's very sodden. We're going to do some more diversion water pathways, again with these scrapes and bunds to hold back the water so that it doesn't get to the city. Who here has a driveway? Is your driveway permeable or impermeable?
It also needs to be sorted. But I newly moved in there in the last year, and this is why I need the information
Yeah.
to sort it.
Perfect. Lucy, what's your new driveway like?
Ah! But it's got flower beds at the side.
Okay.
And a front garden with hedges.
Better. Even better could be something like this. So as part of this project, we are turning 4 driveways on the Cirencester Road in Charlton Kings, Cheltenham, into demonstration driveways as to what you can do. So here, for example, we've got lots of sedum. If you tend to always park in the same place, there's no reason why the middle section can't be fully sedum. Sedum is very sturdy, it doesn't need a lot of soil, it can handle the drought. And then you have these crisscross concrete sections again with sedum in the middle. If you want to have a physical look, we've got some examples in our disabled car park area over there that you can go and see.
That's great. How do you stop it being taken over by dandelions then?
You just got to learn to love dandelions. Or do some, yeah, just nip them in the bud, literally. Yeah, and that doesn't have any dandelions.
It doesn't have someone weeding it all the time. So.
Well, that's what we need.
Yeah. A tortoise, yeah. Yeah, I would love to have a tortoise. Ali, you can bring your. Have you got a tortoise? You had a terrapin or whatever. Sorry.
You have to mow over the top of that.
If it's sedum, no. If you plant it well with sedum, then none of the other grasses or plants should be able to establish themselves. So if you keep on top of it to begin with, then long term it will be lower maintenance.
So with the tyre of the car going up over it isn't going to hurt it?
No, because they're sunken in.
Okay.
And then typically you move the car in the day, or do try and not keep your car there for days and days without moving it. But they are tolerant, very tolerant plants.
Is that a photo or an artist's impression? Colours are quite lurid.
It may have been colour enhanced, but it did. There's so many. I think this was in America, if I'm honest. I haven't seen one like as cool as this in England.
So have you got photos of a real one in this country?
Well, you can go and see them in the car park. Yeah. So we've got this example in the car park, and we have. So the other options for permeable surfaces are these sort of slabs with gaps in between, and then underneath you've got a good layer of stone, like an underlayer of stone. So again, you can see that in our car park here. Resin is permeable. It is a bit more expensive, and it contains chemicals, so it may not be as environmentally friendly as your sedum eco-grid, and then stone again with a big layer. So when we were walking up and down the Cirencester Road looking at our driveways, you saw the tarmac front driveways completely flooded, and then the stone ones absolutely fine. So we will be making a guide on how to convert your driveway and the problems that we experienced and how you can overcome them. Is it in Gloucester, Ali, or in Cheltenham? You don't need planning permission to convert your driveway if it's permeable.
Both, I think.
Both. So the council are trying to help with this, because I remember in my street, and I'm sure you all do, everyone having a front garden, and then as the years go by, it's just more and more and more cars until there's no greenery left. So, 60 million people in this country, and if everyone is doing that, then you can see where the problem arises, and it needs to be every single person at least doing one thing, and then we can cumulatively make a difference. Green verges, again, you will have seen them vanish over the years because no one wants to look after them. So we are building a green verge at Warden Hill in Cheltenham. And this green verge will hold back 26,000 litres of water at any one time. So, and then even more once we've planted it. There were problems with green verges in Cardiff with cars driving over them and them turning into muddy messes. So we're making sure that the edges are raised. So we're learning from other people's mistakes, and again just really helping to bring some greenery to the urban areas. We're going to do a bus shelter with an eco roof, again Warden Hill. The sedum is really good at holding the pollution, at absorbing pollution. Air pollution is a huge problem. I did a nature highway on Barton Street in Gloucester where the levels of pollution were above the legal limit. So if we can get green bus shelters in amongst our cities, then it not only helps with pollution, helps with greenery, helps people's well-being because it really cheers them up. So in Barton Street, for example, I did a few beds and a beautiful, an artist did it, not me, I can't claim that, a beautiful nature mural. And I spoke to one lady who told me that she now felt safe to walk through that area and would change her route because it cheered her up so much. So the power of nature on our well-being is definitely significant.
There's one or two developing like that naturally, I think. The one down by the bus stop by the quays
Okay.
has got about a third of its lid with plants on it, which I think is probably spontaneous.
Great. It's just been so neglected.
Yes. It probably wouldn't take the weight of the whole lot being
Yep, so when we're doing the green roofs, we have to build a whole new bus shelter to hold the weight. But I have seen retrofitted, modified ones, so maybe they just do way less
I think this is
plants.
just weeds that
And that one sounds like just weeds. And very importantly, as I said about the Barton Street Nature Highway, having greenery in the urban areas provides a vital migration route or food stopover route for wildlife, particularly the pollinators, which need our help. Ali is your depave expert here. We haven't done any depaving per se in this project yet, but maybe in the next one. It's just, as you can see, extending the size around the bases of trees. As I always find it really sad when you see the concrete that's been smushed up on the bark of a tree. So if we can depave as much of the concrete as possible, and I think also it's better because then maybe it can bring its roots up a bit more, and then it won't buckle the pavement further afield. So if anyone is free on Monday and wants to come and see some depaving in Cinderford, then Ali will be there demonstrating what can be done, along with rain gardens, a lovely one at the Wesley. So again, a very simple technique which will hold back some more of the water. And then finally, roof gardens. This one may not be real. I'm not 100% sure. You never know. But I have seen some amazing roof gardens, and obviously I looked on Google and it failed me to tell me the amount of roof space in the UK, and no one has quite calculated that yet. But the potential for roof gardening is vast, as long as you have a strong enough roof to be load bearing, and with 55% of the world's population now living in cities, which is 4.2 billion. That's a lot of people who don't have access to growing space, and that's an awful lot of people who could be at least harvesting rainwater, and gardening and holding back some of the water. So that's it from me. This is our website. If you want to access any of our resources, this is my email address. And if anyone has any suggestions as to anything we could do in your local area, we're still looking for a location to do a rain garden in Cheltenham. So if anyone has any ideas for that one, if anyone wants to volunteer with us, we're always looking for help. And then just to say, our next lunchtime talk is about hedgehogs, and that's Thursday the 18th of April with Nikki Simpson. So thank you for coming, and if you have any questions, fire away.